it's important to try things, right? As you noted earlier on, Dingu, we live in the information age. Information is readily available, right? If you don't understand something, go look it up. Go and consume that information so ensure the next time you understand it. Um, we don't ever want to be in a situation where we are told what to do without us understanding what we've been told to do. So go and read up, go and for yourself, read up about blockchain, AI, how they work together. Come up with your own, premises around this can work in this way. Find solutions that now become possible with technology.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Engatica's interview series. I'm your host Dinku Sagar and we are really glad to have you join us today. And today we have Fabian Vandermeer from Microsoft. He's a blockchain and AI expert. Welcome to the show, Mav.
Thank you very much, Dingu. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, a little bit about Engatica. The Engatica interview series is a powerhouse of insights from industry experts and influencers from all around the globe. A platform that provides the latest news on AI, automation, and technologies that will help you grow your business. Come be part of our community. Let's learn, share, and grow together. So let's dive into the questions. So this is something which I personally had a question. So this is about the role of cloud in blockchain. So there has been a lot of interesting activities going in the Web3 space. So before Web3, we had Web2, and cloud played a very important role in Web 2, right? So most organizations were moving from their on-premise to cloud services and finding them more efficient and valuable. Today, as we transition to Web3, many cloud providers such as AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM is starting to bring this concept of blockchain as a service. So, an interesting question that comes is, can blockchain be really decentralized on the cloud? Like the question I was thinking was, hypothetically, if a cloud provider wants to shut down the nodes running a blockchain, won't they be able to do that? And won't it defeat the whole purpose of decentralization? So, what are your thoughts on the role of cloud in blockchain?
Um, I think as you noted about Web 2.0 being very dependent on cloud, it's actually helped from a digital transformation perspective. So cloud has been paramount and instrumental in actually helping customers, especially during the pandemic, to be able to be agile enough to actually pivot when the market wasn't going their way because of traditional systems that they used to have. So cloud helped them to potentially open new markets, create new opportunities, because there wasn't a need to procure hardware, as an example, and wait months to get hardware. Also, but potentially the ability to upgrade very quickly. So where there was an uptake in demand for services, the hardware became the single point of failure at that point in time. Example would be if you had a website and you created a unique product during COVID that helped millions and millions of people, and you have millions of people hitting your website, as an example, your your infrastructure couldn't cater for that demand. So what happened was you just drop packets, you just drop customers. So potential customers you've lost. Now what cloud did was cloud then allowed you to scale as you needed to scale for a period of time, and then to revert back to your normal configuration when the demand decreased. So that made it very, very appealing to a lot of customers. So to answer your question very directly now around whether cloud vendors and hyperscalers can turn off nodes, etc. In very few cases this has happened. The only time that really do that is if a solution on their architecture is violating human rights, for example, or it violates compliances and specific policies like GDPR, POPI, for example, then they might have recourse for that, but they won't just turn it off. They'll actually consult with the customer first to say, please, you're violating our rights of using our services. Please refrain and fix this and that. So it's not a matter of turning it off. The other potential way that they could turn off a solution, be it a blockchain, whatever solution, right, is non-payment. So the customer hasn't paid for the services, or they haven't honored the invoices that have been sent to them. But it's usually not just you didn't pay, we can turn it off. It's a consultative process to say you're 3 months outstanding or 90 days outstanding, whatever it may be. Please, can you settle your bill? If you don't settle your bill, then unfortunately we have to turn off your services. But it's not specific to turning off blockchain nodes, etc. So most of the time we have a view, or let's say Microsoft Azure, AWS, or GCP have a view of the services running, but we don't know exactly the information or data that consists of those services, because that's private. We don't have access to the customer's information, or information of their customers that sit in, for example, a database. We know that they're running a Azure SQL database as an example, but we don't know what's in there. We can't see what's in there because the data is encrypted, in transit and at rest and in use. And the customer has those private keys. We don't, as from a Microsoft perspective, have access to that, and I doubt whether AWS or GCP have that policy as well. So we provide a platform that the customer can decide how they want to use that platform. And if they violate our use of services or service rights usage, there might be recourse to terminate, but very seldom will they do that. So from a decentralized perspective, if you're looking at decentralization from a blockchain perspective, which is the underpinning premise on blockchain is that it's decentralized. You can look at it in various ways. You can look at members of the ecosystem, right? So you could have multiple members of an ecosystem running on multiple public clouds. You could have 2 running on AWS, 5 on Azure, 6 on GCP, or IBM for that matter, right? But it's this concept of decentralization, meaning that the ledger is shared with every participant of the ecosystem. That's the decentralization piece. There isn't a central server that everyone connects to, but everyone has an exact copy of the ledger. And should one of the nodes drop for whatever reason, they'll get back online and they'll sync the data back. So they have an exact copy of the ledger, and the transaction that occurred when they were not available online. So that's the decentralization piece. And I doubt very much whether all public cloud or hyperscalers will end the nodes immediately. So the concept of decentralization still holds true, is that you don't have to lose one system in order to take down the entire solution. You can, multiple systems can still be unavailable, but the solution itself will continue to run with a certain amount of nodes, right? Because you need to have a certain amount of nodes to validate transactions from a consensus mechanism, or the consensus approach that decentralization has. So out of 6, you need to have 4 up for consensus, right? So that's the whole premise here.
Right. I think I agree to that. So one thing is the whole, it's not like we are deploying one application and someone taking down that single application. It's like, let's say, take for Ethereum, for example, it's a public ledger where multiple smart contracts corresponding to multiple applications can run. And when I deploy a blockchain application, it is just my smart contract and the nodes that I deploy, and there are multiple nodes corresponding to other applications, and all of them are validating each other and working towards this decentralized consensus. And so in that aspect, it doesn't make sense for anyone to bring down the whole, it's as good as saying, can someone bring down the whole internet, right? So can AWS shut down the entire instances to bring down the whole internet, which makes no sense because they have their own SLAs, and they have no reason to do that. So
there was a case in the 90s, I think the late 90s, where IoT devices were hacked and used as an instrument for distributed denial of service attacks against the internet, which actually brought down the internet for a few days. I mean, no one could understand why it happened, but after some kind of root cause analysis, they discovered that there were millions and millions of devices that were sending packets to routers, because routers effectively are the backbone of any network, in which the internet
Mhm.
pretty much is a large, gigantic network of computers, right? So
Right.
they hit the routers, and the routers couldn't handle the amount of traffic, and that caused them to actually stop processing packets.
Mhm.
And so that was taking down the internet, was to create that distributed denial of service attack using multiple IoT devices. And I gave a talk on this some years back on how to use blockchain to secure IoT devices, to prevent them from being hacked and used as again in a distributed denial of service attack against the internet or a
Yeah.
company or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it would be really interesting to see how blockchain saves the whole vulnerabilities of the current internet and makes it more reliant because you're not relying on one central cloud provider or like one central authority. It's again decentralized, and even if all the hypothetically, I'm saying it may not actually happen, but even if all the government decides to, or the cloud providers decide to shut down all the nodes, we could still have blockchain nodes running in different consumer machines, and still uh, the internet would be active
Absolutely
in a way, right? So that's really
correct.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, coming to the next question, so we have like in the tech space, there are like a lot of hot technologies going around, AI and blockchain and metaverse and whatnot. So, what do you think are some of the interesting applications that will come up combining these technologies, or like what do you think of, or the future would be like? Uh,
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually giving a talk later on today around this topic, around what is next, right? So,
Mhm.
so, so the entire world has changed. I mean, from 2 years ago, what we knew about the world is no longer applicable 2 years later. There was a pandemic that hit, so that changed the way people, uh, consumers purchase goods. Now it's predominantly online. I mean, very few people. The malls are so empty as a consequence of people having to be in lockdown. So they used online purchasing, which has now grown like 1,000% or more. So there was a need for a better way of doing things. Also, you couldn't meet in person because so many countries were in lockdown. So, but human beings are social beings. We want to be able to interact with people. It what gives us like a reason to wake up in the morning, right? So the metaverse, or the concept of this metaverse of a combination of multiple 3D worlds and virtual realities or augmented realities, etc., mixed realities, came about more so prevalently during the time of the pandemic, because people still wanted to be feel like they were interacting with friends, colleagues, family, etc., even though so entering a garden in the metaverse gave them peace, because their avatar could experience that, and even though they couldn't themselves. So all of these things are nice to have, but we have to just drill down into what is the technology that underpins these things, right? So artificial intelligence for me is absolutely one of those technologies that will add value to human society. It's the ability now that if I want to call a doctor, for example, I don't want to go to the doctor. I can go onto a website, askdoctor.com or whatever these websites are now. I can put in some of my symptoms using AI. It will analyze potentially what the issue could be, the underlying issue, and should the AI uh, model detect that this could be a serious problem, automatically it'll get in touch with a human doctor to be able to then take it further to say, okay, let's diagnose this a bit further, because this could be life threatening. So the use of AI in our everyday lives is becoming more and more important. I mean, we look at the self-driving cars, for example, that relies very heavily on AI. But in in my view, I actually want to make a statement to say, blockchain is that tech, that one tech that rules them all. Okay, and I'll qualify that statement by saying in every new disruptive technology today, blockchain has been firstly the number one disruptive tech since the last 7 years. I've been involved with blockchain since 2015, like actively involved. But before that, I was a passive observer to what Bitcoin is doing, etc. But if you look at AI, AI is based on data. Okay, AI will look at a data set and depending on how you train the model, will make some inferences about the data. It will then choose yes. I looked at an X-ray of a lung, and I can detect potential cancer cells in the lung. It will then make a decision based on the data set. So, but if the data is compromised for whatever reason, right, it it basically allows harmful actors to manipulate the AI negatively because it's only looking at the data. Okay, so how do we secure that? And in my opinion, blockchain should be the underlying architecture or the the platform, the foundation on which you build these other technologies on. Okay, because blockchain, in my opinion, is a trust engine, right? It creates the trust between various institutions, third parties, and systems themselves. I mean, using blockchain to secure an IoT device creates the trust between that device and people using that device in a system. That's the underlying premise. So blockchain being the foundation. On top of that, you have, for example, things like non-fungible tokens, which is NFTs, also growing very, very fast in the last 2 years because the need for people to interact with each other, to trade things, to digitize assets and be able to trade that and sell off, etc. But again, NFTs based on cryptocurrencies, and that is entrenched in the blockchain. So without blockchain, there is no smart contracts. It doesn't exist. Nick Szabo in 1990s actually came up with a concept like a smart contract. He called it BitGold at the time. It didn't take off because there was this element of security and trust that was missing. Okay, fast forward 15 years, 16 years later, 2009, then they're about 20 years later, you came up with this concept of a platform that ensures trust. You created in a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. What was the underlying technology? It was blockchain, because blockchain then enforces the trust. Now, because there's a trust engine that runs, smart contracts now become viable because, firstly, you can't change anything that happens because blockchain is immutable. Once it's written to the chain, you can't change it. So it it creates this element of trust now. If I execute a smart contract, people trust the system. The system was designed to work in this way. So smart contracts won't work unless there's a blockchain. So that, again, blockchain underpins that. Metaverse, how would you create security within a metaverse for example, looking at decentralized identity? Am I my avatar or am I not? How do you know that? You can simply create a decentralized identity on the blockchain that uses multiple sources to verify identity of an individual. For example, in South Africa, we have a green book. Well, that's the old system. There's a card now, a plastic card that actually identifies me as me. It's the authoritative proof that I am who I claim to be. But we've seen so many fraudulent transactions and people creating these books and these cards that are fake. So you you can't just rely on a piece of plastic to ensure identity. So there has to be multiple areas to enforce that trust, as in biometric scan, a fingerprint, a DNA, whatever it may be. You can then verify in 3 different sources that I am who I say I am and record that on the blockchain. So if you scan a QR code on my phone, these 3 sources of verification come up and they verify me as me. I can then transact securely within a metaverse. But again, the underlying premise, the underlying technology here is blockchain. And you can look at a lot of other applications. What we're seeing now is decentralized finance. coming up as well. Also running on a decentralized system, which is blockchain. It's the ability to interact with financial institutions, but except them not being banks. So if I've got cryptocurrency, for example, and let's say I have 100 Bitcoin, and I'm looking to finance a loan for someone, okay, I participate in the ecosystem. The algorithm that runs on AI basically determines the best match for an individual looking to borrow some fiat currency against crypto. Okay, using crypto as the actual securities mechanism here. That can be done. It's not mainstream yet because there are certain areas that need to be adhered to. We haven't fully secured the actual anti-money laundering piece, because again, it comes down to identity. Who is the person transacting here? And that should be covered. I mean, you cannot have an anonymous person lending you money if you have no idea who they are. So from a KYC perspective as well, certain areas are a bit gray, so that doesn't become mainstream yet. But once we have some regulation on that, I think for the need for banks wouldn't exist any longer, loaning securities or money to individuals. So yeah, those are pretty much the main technologies that I see currently in the last 2 years or so that have grown. But again, blockchain underpins them all,
Yeah,
in my
right.
opinion.
I see. I think you have listed a lot of interesting possibilities with these technologies coming together, and I guess the list goes for our imagination, right? As it's all about thinking what can be done combining these technologies. And one thing which I could uh, point to what was the combination of, the application of AI in medical field. So people are more reluctant to giving out their medical data out of privacy concerns, and
Yep,
uh, blockchain, I could see blockchain being a very interesting way to handle that privacy concerns. So it comes up with its own promises of anonymized, decentralized transactions, right? So
yep,
that would be a very interesting way in which people could actually share their medical data to train an AI model which can cure diseases, identify, diagnose diseases, but not at the cost
yep,
of giving out who they are and these are the medical
yeah.
conditions they
I
have.
mean, Dingu, you could potentially, as a consumer, monetize
Right,
sharing of your information,
right,
because at the moment, your information is readily available to a lot of people, right? To a lot of
exactly.
institutions. If you have a bank account, that's available to the potential banking partners. Despite you may not opting for that option,
Right,
it's there. You
right,
can't control what they do in the back end to say, okay, let's share this information. Because sometimes I get a call from a broker from, where do you get my information from, for example, and he can't tell me, for example. So
exactly.
I propose that I should own my own information.
Right,
Information must sit with me. I then decide who must have access to my information at a cost,
right,
unless it's a medical condition or things like that. If you want to have my information and you want to market it so that you can make money, I want to make money from it as well. So having that my information encapsulated in a blockchain environment, I can then say, okay, I give permission via a smart contract that Dingu gets this bit of information from me, and for that I'm going to charge you $100.
right,
Okay, for a period of time. So
right,
for 1 month, you've got this information, access to this information. Okay. After that, the smart contract cancels, and you no longer have access to this information because information is then purged on the
hmm,
platform that you have access to. It's gone. So that's how I see it. I see it happening and going forward is that citizens will own their information and they will decide who will have access to this information or who doesn't. So it's a
yeah, that's
request for information. Yeah.
right, right. So yeah, I guess that is like another cool aspect of blockchain. In this information age, information is wealth, right? And then
Correct.
there are few authorities with few companies who are good at controlling wealth at large scale. They I mean, good at controlling information at large scale, they end up with the whole wealth of
Correct.
extracting this. And then but the whole model will shift to the source of the information. Can the
Yeah.
wealth be redistributed to the people who are actually the source of the information? Those are like interesting, really cool, interesting ideas the
Yeah.
blockchain
I
can
think
bring.
about these things all the time, but how do we
Right.
actually, you know, uh, take control back from institutions that supposedly have your best interests at heart?
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, going to the next question. So, could you talk a little bit about decentralized autonomous organizations, or as people call it, DAOs, right? What are the
DAOs.
interesting possibilities
Yeah.
there?
Surprisingly, I actually gave a talk on this at the AI conference in 2018 before COVID hit. Around my topic was, in data do we trust or do
Mhm.
we? Right. So that was my,
Right.
and the whole premise was around using data in a responsible manner, and actually being able to verify that that data is in fact the correct data that you're using to to train a model. Okay, so a DAO, or a decentralized autonomous organization, runs again on the blockchain because of the element of trust that needs to be implemented there. But it relies very heavily on AI to make decisions. Okay, so a decentralized autonomous organization does not rely on people to run. Okay, so they
Right.
are like, I'm going to make a bold statement. Most governments probably don't need people to run the government because
Right.
they make bad decisions. Um, you know, just look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict now. Someone made a very bad decision to invade another country. It is what it is, and the whole world is suffering as a consequence. There are people in Somalia that are dying because the, the grain exports that they rely on for survival, it's no longer coming from Ukraine because of the embargoes. So people are dying because of bad decisions. So we had tried this some years back, right? So decentralized autonomous organizations was tried a few years back. It wasn't as successful as we thought it could be because it was hacked. Okay, so in in building a solution, any solution, and this is what I prescribe to a lot of customers, um, that we need to have security at at the start of a conversation. When you build a solution, you build it to fail. You build it, or you think about building it in a way of, what if someone hacked this thing? How would they get in, right? And then you look at all the scenarios that potentially could do this, right? And what we're seeing now is that hackers are using AI as a means of breaching defenses. So in order to secure a solution or your IT estate, you need to also use AI as a means of counteracting the effects of malicious AI to actually enter, find a breach in your system. And that pertains to users as well. Okay, users having access to very sensitive information with passwords that are stuck on their computers. For example, I mean, the most famous hacker of all time, his name was Kevin Mitnick. And Kevin Mitnick hacked all the cell phone companies, notably Motorola. And he basically utilized the cell phone infrastructure to create a means for him to enter banks and other institutions. Okay. And how he actually got the information was rummage through the garbage of companies. And there you could find documents that were not shredded, but documents detailing how this system works. And he basically mapped out a plan of attack based on acquiring information, right? So that's important to actually notice, that the single point of failure usually is the person, the human being behind the screen. So having a DAO that runs, for example, a business, having an organization as a DAO, you want to be able to take the human factor out of it, but still have some ethical behavior when the AI makes decisions. but the decision is made, the best decision is made on the data that's at hand. So potentially, um, you can work for an organization. Let's take it. Let's call it Fabian Incorporated. Okay, Fabian Incorporated is just a name. Okay, there are no physical offices of the company, fictitiously, but I've got employees around the world that perform certain functions. Like they do a job and they get paid. Okay, so the payment piece is a smart contract. It's a simple. Was the job completed? Yes. Was it completed to the satisfaction of the customer? Yes. Did Fabian or Dingo bill for the work? Yes. Take all of that information into account. Look at the initial terms of conditions of that employment project or contract, and then pay Dingo or Fabian accordingly. And be it in crypto, be it in fiat, that the mechanism needs to actually work itself out. But typically, you wouldn't need people to run a very basic organization that delivers services and then get paid for those services. It does become a bit complicated if you're running a different kind of business. Let's say it's a healthcare practice. There you need empathy, pretty much,
Right.
in order to actually um, run that business effectively. And there may need to be a call made, at the highest levels to say, okay, we're not going to charge them this rate now because they've come in 3 times for the same symptoms and it hasn't gotten better, right? So we're going to waiver this fee. So there has to be that kind of thing. But can the AI do it effectively? Probably not. So there's certain industries that will benefit from a DAO and certain industries that will not benefit from a DAO. Personally, I think a government will benefit from a DAO. Any government. There are certain things and basic set of rules that they are accountable to citizens for. In this country, they fail the citizens. Um, they've taken bribes. Has been well spoken about that South Africa is a generally corrupt government. Would a DAO solve that issue? Probably. I mean, I would like to see personally my tax authority, the South African Revenue Services, enter into a smart contract with me. Every month I pay my taxes. I've got no choice in the matter. It comes with my salary. But I want to be able to say, out of the tax that you take from me, 20% of my tax I want you to put into the road system. Fix the roads. There are potholes all over the place. Fix it. 40% I want to invest in education. Right? And the balance would be in healthcare, as an example. I would want that smart contract to be initiated between my revenue service and me. The technology exists to actually do this right now, but
Right.
it there is no accountability to what happens to my tax. I can't go to say what is my tax money, rands, done for the country, because I don't know what happens to it once it's taken from my
Right.
salary. It goes into a big hole and someone can walk away with it in their back pocket, buy 10 Mercedes Benzes, and off you go. We don't know. So the accountability of government will be a non-starter question in a DAO, because the DAO is built on data and making decisions on a data set.
Right.
So should there be an issue of roads or potholes somewhere else, you via smart contract can interact with the DAO and say, please use 20% of my money to fix the roads that's outside my house. So that's what I feel is possible right now. But we need to do it better than we did it in version 1, because it
Right.
worked for a long time. It worked, but then it got hacked, and then the confidence levels now are saying, "Oh crap, we tried this, it got hacked. Now what? Do it better. Fix what the issues were back then. Know what the issues were and do it better. Build it better. Think of security as a underpinning technology that supports the blockchain hand in hand. You know, and build it properly. So just to give you an example, I mean, Microsoft invests billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars in security. There's a reason why we do that, because Microsoft Windows specifically is probably the most hacked product in the world. So we invest billions of dollars and hundreds and billions of dollars in security to ensure that the Azure cloud is the most secure cloud on the planet. Okay, it's we actually put our money where our mouth is here, and that's why I know this for a fact, and I would prefer to run workloads on Azure because I know it's secure. I know the investment that the company makes in security. We take security very seriously. I'm not saying the other clouds don't, and don't get me wrong, I'm not bad mouthing the other public clouds, but I know this from Microsoft personally. So I would say if you're going to think about deploying to, to the cloud, look at all the clouds, look at what their security posture is, look at how much they invest in security. And we make this information publicly available because we are a publicly listed company. So we know you can go through other financials once it comes out at year end and financial year end, and you can see the investments that we put into security, etc. So it's public knowledge. So we think about security whenever we build something new. And that's what everyone should be thinking about when they create something. Think of the end product, sure. But
Right.
when you're building it out, think of security to help you to actually ensure that something that you're building doesn't get breached, because it's not just your reputation that suffers, it's the information of the people that you have on your system that will also, those people will also suffer because their information is now publicly available as well for scrutiny, as an example. So I hope that answered that question around
Yeah.
the DAO.
Yeah, really some great insights over there. So one thing which came to my mind was we have democracy, and blockchain could be the solution to fix some of the problems of democracy, which we have today as of now. We have this hierarchical systems where the people represent their vote through hierarchies, and and this is slow and inefficient and have corruptions. And so
Yep.
if this can be turned out into a software which is, and everyone has equal say in it, and it is not the human which is making the decision. It's not a bunch of humans in a board meeting or in a meeting room framing the decisions, but it is actually the end users which is
Correct.
having a say in it, right? So it is, the possibilities are
Yeah.
uh, crazy. I mean, thinking about it,
Yeah.
it's
Think of it as shareholders in a company having the
right,
say in other company is run. But now these shareholders are actually millions and millions of people
right,
that they have a say as to how they want this run. I mean, for example, take voting, as you mentioned about democracy, right? Having a free vote is the underlying principle of a democracy. You have a free vote that you can cast at any time, so you can effectively elect your government. But
right,
there's still a lot of fraud. If you look at the US, the complaints about people that were dead that voted, for example, false claims, but who knows? Maybe it's not.
right,
You know,
right,
but how do we secure this? For example, a simple solution would be put a camera up in the booth. It scans your face, right? Your face is unique. It's not going to find a very like a similar person to me and say, oh, it's actually Fabian, but it's Bob. No, it's Fabian has voted. There's a record of him voting. We scanned his face in the booth, and he voted, right? So, I mean, if you didn't vote, for example, you just stood there and took a selfie, it will record you as voting, even though you didn't. So that might be a little bit of an issue that we need to look at. But an algorithm saying there's a digital tablet that instead of paper, you have a digital tablet that you need to pretty much sign on to this tablet via facial rec. So it captures your identity. Then when you cast your vote, you have to cast a vote for the algorithm to then note, okay, now that you've cast your vote, you authenticate your vote with your face again, or even with a biometric, a fingerprint, whatever it may be. But there are mechanisms that we can deploy. Technology exists today that we can utilize to ensure that there's zero fraud in voting process. Why
right,
are we not doing it? It is beyond me. But tablets are not expensive; they're inexpensive devices these days, and a digital camera, a webcam, it's cheap, right?
right.
So why are we not utilizing and ensuring that we keep democracy safe? Why are we not doing it? I don't know. That I can't answer you, unfortunately.
Right. I mean, definitely interesting days ahead as we move forward into the future, right? I guess that brings us to the end of the questions. Do you have anything, any last minute notes to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think it's important to try things, right? As you noted earlier on, Dingu, we live in the information age. Information is readily available, right? If you don't understand something, go look it up. Go and consume that information to ensure the next time you understand it. Um, we don't ever want to be in a situation where we are told what to do without us understanding what we've been told to do. So go and read up, go and for yourself, read up about blockchain, AI, how they work together. Come up with your own, premises around this can work in this way. Find solutions that now become possible with technology. When George Lucas made Star Wars in the 1970s, he wasn't happy with it because it wasn't the way he wanted to make it. But the technology didn't exist back then to allow him to make it the way he did. I mean, for decades, Jabba had no tail. He just sat there in one spot. Then, when technology did finally arrive that could enable his vision 30 years ago, he remade it in the way that he wanted to make it back then. And Jabba had a tail and was walking around, Jabba the Hutt. So it's possible that you can think of a solution in your area, in your country, in whatever you feel is not working. Read up on it, say, this is how we can solve this problem. I gave a very simple issue around voting, being able to authenticate facial rec with biometrics to ensure that this person has actually voted. Simple things like that. Think about it for your community. How can you use technology that exists today and information is freely available? How do you build a solution for solving the problems that you face today in your world? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us. For guys, for more content, subscribe to Engatica and tap on the bell icon to get exclusive access to content from thought leaders around the globe. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you with a new expert soon. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good day. Bye bye.